Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Buenos dias. I guess it's Cinco de Mayo. Not that that's really such a big deal, but okay. Everybody has had their Cinco de Mayo parties probably over the weekend, if you had one at all, and you're over it by now. But well, good morning. How you doing? Lots to catch up on. There certainly is a lot. If you weren't completely distracted by your partying over the weekend, well, what might have captured your interest? Otherwise, gosh, there's a little bit of everything, and one of them, by the way, we're trying to adjust now to the demise of Skype. Greg and I have, of course, long since migrated over to Zoom instead, and Justice and Netroots Radio folks are migrating to, I think they're going the other direction. The suggestion for Skype users, Skype is Microsoft owned, was to migrate over to Microsoft Teams. But it's a little less than seamless, it looks like. Just so I can catch up with Justice and let him know what's happening. He was messaging me, I guess in the dying embers of the supernova of Skype, via Skype. And last night, or at least really right up until just minutes ago, they were arriving, these same messages, arriving both as Microsoft Teams messages on my phone, which has Microsoft Teams. My desktop does not. And that's something I might have to figure out how to remedy. But it was coming in Skype and Teams. Is anybody dealing with this? Or has everybody since moved from Skype? Are we the last dinosaurs on Skype? I guess so. So anyway, the message came through, the usual morning message from Justice telling me that he was receiving our signal, etc., and everything was looking like it was going to work okay. I opened it up I figured this would be the thing to do. Open Teams on the phone, and then all those messages would be displaying that way, as opposed to as pop-up messages on the closed home screen. But as soon as I did that, the messages, I still see them popping up as notices on Skype, so Skype is still technically operating, but then they stopped coming in on Teams. So, I don't know, we'll have to figure out how that works. But maybe the thing to do is just leave the phone alone and just view those messages as pop-ups as they come. Anyway, Greg Dworkin is on the other system, Zoom, and piling up the stories for us to cover, and there are an awful lot of them. And I mean, I thought about possibly just writing a list of one-word reminders. We'll get to all the stories, I'm sure. But over the weekend, let's see. You won't be caught up fully on what's happening in this country unless you're talking about dolls, pencils, movies, and I guess one movie in particular, like Escape from Alcatraz in particular. Alcatraz is another issue. That I guess this is the garbage that happened while Trump was flying back and forth. He also sat for another couple of interviews, also mostly, miserable job by the interviewers, having him say something that's completely outlandish and ridiculous and saying, but I want to move on. Well, don't move on. The president is insane, and you should point that out. And I know it's difficult the interview would end, of course, right then and there. And somebody's going to have to be prepared for that. Somebody's going to make themselves a star, filming him walking off the set and airing it. But then then your channel will be in danger of losing its FCC licensing. So, we know what you're up against. There's all sorts of other things. There's more substantive issues. There's crazy muttering issues. There's corruption issues. There's parts of the government that are getting shut down issues. There's all sorts of things. I don't know if we can get to 50% of them. But I heard the pencil thing. I heard the doll thing. We're up to speed on that. We better focus on the more substantive. I know it all has policy implications, because at any point this crazy guy can just pretend it's policy, and unfortunately the press will then print Trump did do these things, as opposed to Trump proclaimed something on Truth Social and nobody even wrote it down, and none of the mechanisms to put it in place are happening, and everybody's hoping he'll forget about it. But in the meantime, we're going to print strongmen strongly strongs and and we're stuck with it. Okay, Greg Dworkin is here. I have
That's what you
failed to cue. Oh, okay. We never know.
I mean, how do you know on this particular app? You can't really tell somebody's here.
There's no way to know exactly. Although like we said, well, we've come up with various announcement music, but we've not settled on one favorite yet. And also, I have to make it more accessible. I forget, as I'm talking my way through it, I should have maybe something I need to do before air. Now, open up that the page with all of the different fanfares so we can play something. I don't know. And
that's work, man.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I have to prep ahead of time or figure out what I'm doing or something like that.
What's the fun in that?
I can't think of any real reason to do it. So anyway, where's my Imperial Margarine one? You like that one?
I like that one.
You settled
really
on
good.
that one. I love the long things, so they're crazy.
Dolls is because the economy is going to tank, and really girls only need a couple of dolls. They don't need 30.
Yes,
and
William
pencils is because, like, who needs 250 pencils as if he's never met a teacher in his life, which is probably true.
That could certainly be the case.
Films have to do with saying that it's an emergency.
Yeah, national security.
A national emergency, and he has to somehow do something about foreign films. Or as one of my friends on Daily Kos pointed out, you mean like the only foreign film he knows is Triumph of the Will, and what's he going to do with that?
Yeah, I mean, you could stop and spend some time on that and just wonder, for instance, well, first of all, how could there be a national security emergency because of foreign movies? He tried to, make something up about it. There is a root cause for the whole thing. Like, okay, and he hinted at it. He must have seen these articles too. I hadn't seen these articles, but here at home, others had seen the articles. The movie industry in the United States there's less work for production staff. And the production staff here is sensitive to that. Production staff for movies in traditional Hollywood as filming moves overseas, as production and post-production moves overseas, like every other industry. But so somehow, though, that got into, we're going to find a way to tariff movies, and I don't even know. I can't even imagine what that would look like. Is it a sales tax on tickets? Is it at the Oscars you have to pay me $1 million if you win, but you're a foreign film? I don't know.
It's a value-added tax for creativity.
I guess.
And I'll decide what's worth it and what's not worth it. The whole thing is nuts. Everything about him is nuts.
That may be what they were talking about. When did they do this? A couple of weeks ago, some organization inside the government, allegedly part of our government, tweeted something out. Was it, ICE, where they tweeted out that poster they had put together. If it crosses the U.S. border illegally, it's our job to stop it. And it had the words people, money, products, all things we understand how to do, and the ideas, the most bizarre thing, the most big brother thing you ever heard in your life. It's our job to stop illegal ideas from crossing the border. How? Well, crack your head open. That's how.
I wasn't going to start with this, but I think I'll start with this.
Oh, all right then.
My pundit roundup from this morning has the title, "What Repels Us, They Find Endearing," somehow.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
And I don't get it. And the ideas part certainly is like that. It's from a New York Times story looking at Trump supporters because they love to do that. An exciting first 100 days. The president's supporters acknowledge that the ride is bumpy, but they say they're willing to sacrifice it, wouldn't have it any other way.
You can't.
The Trump iconography, ridiculed by the opposition as cultish or repellent, the president's hug of the American flag or holding up the Bible, is viewed endearingly by his supporters. They're just harmless stunts, him being brash. It's not like he's going to go to war saying some country has weapons of mass destruction. The funny thing is, they don't pick on Democrats to point out the opposite of Trump. They pick on W, which gives you an idea of how low W's currency is in the current Republican Party.
Yes, well, he was the cloak under cover of which the Cheneys snuck into national politics, and they're the biggest.
But also globalization, and so they recognize it, even though the media doesn't recognize it and blames Obama. In fact, it was W and Republicans who set all that stuff into motion. But in any case, My observation was they may only be 35% of the electorate. They may not be able to win elections, but they get written about a lot.
That's true.
But
Yeah.
I still think
Hmm.
the best approach is to nod your head knowingly when you hear this stuff.
Knowing.
Not
Yeah.
approvingly.
Right. Well, we allow you to
Knowingly.
nod knowingly by letting
And
you
then
know.
outvote them.
Okay.
And if you have to discuss it at all, just ask them how come they so fiercely hate people different than they are. It's the one thing that gets them to pause. It doesn't get them to change,
No.
but it gets them to pause. So that, sometimes that's all you want. It's like, stop talking about this already. You're an idiot. Stop.
Okay.
So that's one semi-neutral slap in the face you could do.
All right.
If you're ever stuck in that situation. But that's not the story I want to start
No.
with. I want to start with what I think is the big story, even if people don't realize it's the big story, and it's going to be the big story, and it's going to test the resolve of those Trump voters who think everything he does is wonderful, and it's just playing around, and he's cute and funny, and, in a obnoxious frat boy freshman kind of way. So this is a discussion with some of the people who run the West Coast ports where goods are delivered.
Oh, good.
Long Beach,
Good.
Los Angeles, the biggest one.
All right.
And it appears in Bloomberg. And the story goes, leaders of major West Coast ports warned that a sharp drop in ship traffic tied to Trump's steep tariffs
Oh, yeah.
will threaten jobs, raise prices, and ripple through the broader U.S. economy. Port of Long Beach Chief Executive Officer Mario Cordero said the trade policies will discourage shipping activity at the largest U.S. gateways for goods from Asia. Ships arriving with fewer containers will mean less work for longshoremen, truck drivers, warehouse employees, and retailers across the country. Right. This is on a reporter call. And these are Trump constituents, I should point out. This activity directly supports 2.7 million jobs. It's an effect that will be felt far beyond the docks. And traffic could fall as much as 40% by late May. It's early May, so we're talking 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Separately.
This is a real 2 weeks, though.
This is a real 2 weeks. Separately, Gene Soroka, and this is the clip I want to play for you because he's a smart guy and he's really articulate about what's going on.
Mario's not in this? All right.
Executive director of the Port of Los Angeles said earlier that cargo volumes are already slowing.
Sure.
Our prediction in 2 weeks, arrivals will drop by 35%. Essentially, all shipments out of China for major retailers have ceased. So I have a clip.
Yes. Well, I have it now.
And let's see if we can play at least part of it.
Okay. Right. Oh, I was worried, by the way, of the guy, Mario, reminded me that the other guy, the shooter in jail, is Luigi. I'm beginning to fear what's happening here.
It's a conspiracy.
Yeah, clearly. Okay, I've got your clip queued up. Let's roll.
I got your clip right here.
Let's take a beat. Really frame it for us. How much volume has just dropped off in the last few weeks?
Yeah, about a third of the import volume, which means give or take about 50,000 20-foot equivalent units gone off the arrivals coming in next week.
So from next week is when you expect to see this really hit?
That's correct. And that matches up. The announcement's back on April 2nd. Then on April 8th, a little bit of a change on everybody, ex-China, Mexico, Canada. And those arrivals are coming at us this weekend.
We'll, of course, dedicate time to your port, but I'm just wondering how you're anticipating this rolls and ripples through the economy from here, how it hits trucking, when this turns up on the shelf. What's the distance, the time from when you see a drop-off in volume and when we, as consumers, see the shortages?
Yeah, right. So CEOs are telling me, hit the pause button, right? I'm not going to import any more at these kind of prices. Let's wait and see. I don't know if it's going to be 2 hours, 2 days, or 2 weeks till I get some clarity.
2 weeks, probably.
Then hiring. Off the table for right now. Capital investment, pause. And the retailers are telling me that realistically, with even the 10%, I'm going to have to pass it on to the consumers.
So, all right. Well, there's more. There's plenty more, but we want to comment at this point? Okay.
Yeah, and I digest some of the stuff he's saying.
Yes, that's Gene Soroka, who you introduced.
So he's a Port of Los Angeles
guy. Okay.
Yep.
He's tan.
And he knows this guy knows what he's talking about.
He's
there.
Well-spoken.
He can see the empty port.
Well, yeah. Oh, that could be a green screen. But
from his window.
Yeah, it looks empty there. That's for sure. And everybody reports. People have been driving by, snapping pictures of empty ports wherever they live.
Mhm.
So he's certainly correct. And all right, 2 weeks. You got to shop.
Right.
This
So
is
the
difficult to know
drop-off
what to do,
is
though.
expected in the port between May 4th and 10th. It's already starting.
Well, it's
But
May 5th.
today's, yesterday was Star Wars Day, the 4th.
Right.
And today is post-Star Wars Day, the 5th. So this week is when you see the slowdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes on to tell you
I
about
guess.
how it's going to feel on the East Coast. So maybe we can play a little more of that clip.
Because that's where I live, and the
Exactly.
other guys are not awake yet. You'll hear
All
it later
you
in the
listeners on the
podcast.
West Coast, you're sleeping
Go
anyway.
back
So
to
let's
bed.
deal with the East.
Except Justice. Well, good morning, Justice.
He's
Okay.
always, he never sleeps.
Right.
Justice
So
never
how
sleeps.
much is this really coming from all over? It's not just about China. This is about really global trade coming to a standstill until there is a much greater degree of certainty and a much lower tariff rate than even the baseline that's been put out there.
Yeah, when I was last with you all, Lisa, I said global trade's going to slow, economies will follow, and that's exactly what we're seeing. Back in November, so many of us were wringing our hands about 4% inflation. We've just added 10 percentage points to imports coming out of Southeast Asia for our port, and these unbelievable numbers out of China.
How much are you going to see a real decline in dock workers if this goes on?
Yeah, this is the question. So the trucker hauling 4 or 5 containers today, next week, she probably hauls 2 or 3. The dock workers are no longer going to see overtime and double shifts. They're going to probably work less than a traditional work week, starting right off the bat. Every 4 containers mean a job. So when we start dialing this back, it's less job opportunity.
That's an interesting metric right there. Every 4 containers.
I mean, he's so clear about
Wow.
what's going on here.
Yeah.
Like, even I can understand it.
How is he doing this so early in the morning? This might have been yesterday. But,
Right.
wow, okay. So every 4 containers, and I mean, there's thousands, obviously. It's all it takes to get the bosses for the metrics to say somebody should be getting laid off. Every 4 containers that don't come? Wow.
Yeah, and we're putting numbers on them in chalk. 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, 4, you're gone.
Job.
1, 2, 3, 4, you're gone.
Learn to code.
Look, if you can't
Join
count to
Doge.
35 billion, at least you can count to 4. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying here?
Wow. All right.
You're out. You're gone.
That's a little scary. There's more. Would you like? Well, shall we continue? This guy's message is pretty good.
Well, I'm just saying, before
scary,
you play
but
the rest of the
yeah.
clip, you don't
All
have
right.
to be a Justin Walters or, one of the Jared economists or Rosalind McGregor to understand this stuff. I mean, I can understand it.
Yeah. Well, putting it pretty well.
So go ahead, play
Awesome.
more
Nice.
of them.
Okay.
And what happens if we get a deal?
If we get a deal, it's going to
deal.
take
Get outta
about a
here.
month. Let me walk you through that real quick. About 2 weeks to get the ships repositioned around these major ports, from Qingdao to Shanghai to Xiamen, load up all those containers, and then another 2 weeks to steam across the Pacific to get to us. This is important because now we're talking about spring and summer fashion. So we're kind of at a crux here that we've got to have something pretty quick.
And back to school, which
That's
is going
right.
to be, I think, very critical when it comes to political pushback for this administration.
That's why you can't. That's it. You're only getting 5 pencils now, kids. Because are the pencils coming from China? I guess. I don't know. Something. Well, really, they mean all sorts of other things. Lunch boxes and some clothing. Yes. Okay. Right. And so this is supply chain stuff where even if you decided now, I was just kidding with the tariffs and everybody believed you, it still takes time to, make stuff that you stopped making because you thought there was going to be no demand for it because tariffs, and then get it onto a boat, and then, well, first, as he mentions, get the boats to the ports, and then get the stuff on
And
the
put
boats,
them in the right position.
and then
to load.
sail
and
the
that
boats.
takes a couple of weeks.
Wow. And then, and then across a few weeks to get across, and then unloading, and then onto trucks, and then distributed. And so many people have said, even if they struck a fantastic deal that took everything off the table and said, we're going right back where we started, so that it's easy and everybody understands it, it's at minimum a month before they fill the holes on the shelves that are just now baked in. Although we're not quite seeing it. We saw it for eggs, but that was a domestic issue. And so I know a lot of people, MAGA people certainly who don't want to believe it are saying, what are you talking about? All this stuff is still here.
Right. We've been talking about it for the last month
Yeah.
because we could think beyond tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
As far as next week or even
what
next
to think
month.
is difficult. Yeah.
We've been talking about it since Liberation Day on the 2nd.
Yeah.
Or the 5th,
or since he said
whenever
it was
is.
coming.
Yeah.
Once he started to threaten these giant tariffs, everybody knew what that was going to mean.
And then he
But
did it because nobody believed it, and then he did it anyway, and then he did it, undid it, and then he redid it, and then he somewhat did it, and then somebody did it, and so we don't know. And that uncertainty meant, wait a minute, we're not planning. And now
right.
That's when you start restocking for the holidays. Now is when you stock for summer fashion, as that fellow pointed out. Now is when you do back to school stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it has this ripple effect. You get the truckers, you get the longshoremen, you get the Trump voters who were doing these jobs are getting laid off. UPS is laying people off. I mean, there's just not as much to deliver. And so if you're not bringing in the goods, if you're not delivering the goods, you ain't getting the job. You know? So let's see if he has anything else to say.
That I'm sure we haven't gotten to exports yet either, because of course, if you're making things and looking to sell them around the world, the beautiful American products and agricultural products.
So let me give you this from the Bloomberg article. The commissioners also warned of the impact on U.S. manufacturers, farmers, and ranchers who are pulling back their exports to find other markets that wouldn't face the steep retaliatory tariffs that China has placed on U.S. goods. So don't forget, it isn't just that the consumer has to deal with the import tariffs. It's that the farmers and ranchers and manufacturers in the U.S., we want the manufacturing in the U.S., but you can't sell your products overseas because the retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. by people who think Trump's a jerk.
Yes. And so that's problematic. By the way, as you're saying this, Bill Gruskin, being reposted into my Blue Sky timeline here, a journalist and professor himself, and I guess one of his connections is with Bloomberg, and somebody was sending around this very clip that you're talking about, and his idea was, hey, you should replace Scott Jennings on CNN with this guy, and he means Soroka, who we're listening to here. The average CNN listener's IQ shoots up 40 points overnight. Right. It's being well received.
Well, Scott Jennings is going to be replaced, parenthetically.
Yes.
He said, wait for a big announcement. He's probably going to be Pete Hegseth's successor.
He'll be something. Yeah, it was really amazing the other day. He's a CNN commentator. He's on stage at Trump rallies being thanked personally. I can't make it any clearer than this.
If you didn't know he was an ass, this makes it very clear. So let's see if there's anything else on this clip.
Sure.
We have a story out, it was anecdotal reporting as well. We've heard about China quietly starting to exempt about a quarter of U.S. imports. Are any U.S. importers exempting Chinese tariffs? Is there a way to get around the 145%?
Not really. There may be some exceptions, Anne-Marie, maybe a little bit going north or south of us. But realistically speaking, nobody is out there talking a lot about, hey, I got a better deal coming out of China right now.
The Flexport CEO joined us earlier in the week, and he said ocean freight is down 60% from China. When do we see 100%?
Good question. It depends on how long this goes. We heard the reports overnight through Bloomberg that the folks in China are thinking about talking. What does that mean? Okay, great. But we've got to get a move on here. The other thing is that retailers are saying we've got about 5 to 7 weeks of normal inventory in the country right now. Then we start to see spot shortages if it goes on much beyond this.
Okay. And I guess it will go on much beyond this.
So you see the shortages in 2 weeks for some, in 6 weeks for others. So we are talking about end of May, beginning of June, where everybody's going to be aware, and even the MAGA people can't deny it. And they'll put to the test the idea that I'm willing to put up with shortages because my guy says I should.
Yeah, okay, or I haven't seen the shortages. They said there was going to be shortages and there weren't.
Well, you start seeing shortages next week. You're going to see bigly shortages.
It's just a question of
first week of June.
Will MAGA? I mean, I assume they have some different shopping habits than other people too. So yeah, it really depends. And I'm sure there could be a situation where normies in America are saying, hey, I'm seeing shortages in things like, I don't know, nutritious food and well-made products, whereas MAGA shoppers, will say, it will take another 6 weeks before they're out of Funyuns, and they'll say, now we got shortages. This is a problem.
Well, the other side of the coin is that the MAGA people are saying, I'll gladly pay more to shop American.
He says
But you're
so.
not going to be able to find this stuff.
Right.
It isn't a question of whether or not you're willing to pay an extra dollar or two in the dollar store.
That's right.
It's a question of whether there's anything on the shelves at all.
Where is the American flip-flop factory that you're going to get your shoes from? I don't know. It's not going to work that way. Plus, as we were saying, along with the export game, one part of the export game that didn't come up is even if manufacturers, ranchers, farmers can find alternative markets to China, whatever, you name the country, can they get a container and a boat? And if it's an agricultural product, the clock is ticking. If that stuff's not lined up and ready to go because it never arrived, full of Chinese goods,
never
or
sent.
wherever. Yeah, and then you get this all big pile of, I don't know, pick your agricultural product, shows up on the truck and it's at the port and they're like, there's no boat here, there's no container to put it in. Get it out of here. Right now, it's
you're just
garbage.
exaggerating. You're just making things. Well, talk to me in a month.
Okay, very good. Right, and the cows will be very impatient, although they may have already been rendered into beef at that point, which they have nothing to say about the situation. But there's going to be a lot of food wasted and things spoiling or going, even if they're not normally perishable goods, just sitting in the sun and becoming brittle. Who knows what the hell's going to happen with all this stuff? And the answer is nobody. And that's what makes it so difficult to prepare. Even with this advance notice that we have of shortages coming, I don't know, like with the pandemic, we got some indication. Oh, okay, I think masks, impossible to get. Toilet paper, should we get some of that? Yeah, sure. This is everything. You just have to guess. What's going to be in shortage? Everything. I can randomly pick 20% of the things that I might need later. The other 80%, I don't know, black market scrambling, I guess. See you in 2 weeks.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The previous segment was actually welcome back to Bloomberg Television, I guess. So thanks to them for unknowingly giving us the several minutes of their programming. But I don't know. I always say fair use. YouTube usually disagrees with me, but it's well worth it. And we'll be okay. All right, let's see. Let's move on. Greg's still hanging out. And
I think the interviewer on Bloomberg is a fellow named Jonathan Ferro.
Oh, the British
Bloomberg surveillance weekdays. He was London based, but I still don't know exactly where he's from.
And where was this filmed?
Based in the European headquarters in London. And that's all I know about him.
Where was this guy? So the guy from
But
LA.
Bloomberg Media has a whole page on the talent. That's what they call it.
Oh.
Bloomberg Media talent.
Yes.
The people on the air, in other words. The funny thing is there's like 70 different people. So you have to scroll through it and see if there's somebody who sort of looks like the guy you're talking about. And I think I found him. But I'll have to find more about him.
Okay.
I just find his accent intriguing.
Blimey. Me too. All right. Yeah, it was interesting. It had me, I paused for a second and I'm like, it's not Australian twangy enough for that. And it's not New Zealand. I guess it's just British, but It was an unusual one. But, British people will know, not only recognize it right away, but could tell you what city he's from. Which is amazing.
Exactly. What part of the city he's from.
Yeah, exactly. Like within blocks, apparently, some of these people. All right. Well, Henry Higgins.
Yeah, exactly. Just you wait.
Yeah, exactly. So you had another clip, and I have set it up and everything.
So I'm trying to get the response from Republicans to all of this. As you probably know, there was a 49-49 tie rejection of a attempt by the Senate to symbolically get rid of the tariffs. It's only symbolic even if they passed it because the House won't do anything.
Yeah.
But they couldn't even get it passed because a couple of people like Mitch McConnell
symbolic.
weren't there.
Yeah.
And I forget who else, Sheldon Whitehouse or somebody like that, wasn't there. So they didn't get the votes that they needed. They would have been, we're going to say something about Trump. So this is a clip from CNN featuring, it's only 30 seconds, featuring Mark Warner.
Okay. I thought we
on the
were
Intel
for
Committee.
Second segment.
Given the fact that there's been all sorts of problems with Mike Waltz and Hegseth regarding Signal and a Signal-like app from Israel, which had been hacked that they use.
Yeah.
And a hearing where Mike Waltz, or a cabinet meeting where Mike Waltz had a screenshot of him using these apps on his phone even after he was told not to.
Yeah. In the cabinet meeting, where I presume he was supposed to be paying attention.
So Mark Warner's talking about what all that means, and so maybe you can play that clip.
Okay.
It's short. It's only
tell
about
us
30
what's
seconds.
up, Mark. Okay.
But the vast majority of the other members of the committee, I know they're good folks. They just have to be willing. I had one member say, Mark, you're sounding like our conscience.
What?
I don't want to be your conscience. I want you to vote your conscience. Just don't talk to me privately. I do think we're getting close to them stepping up, but the problem is going to be how much structural damage is going to be done before my Republican friends find their voice and voice publicly what they're already saying privately.
So Israel had to shut down its main...
Okay. I got you.
Okay.
That's with Jake Tapper. He's talking to Jake Tapper, who says nothing.
So, step back a little bit.
All
and
right.
Listen to Mark Warner's words and concepts here.
From back here?
Now, how you respond to it is almost a Rorschach test. You can get mad at him because he says some of my Republican friends, and I have friends who are Republicans, and I'm still giving the benefit of the doubt.
Term of art.
And they're decent people privately, yada, yada, yada.
They're not.
Or you can listen to him and say, maybe we're getting close to that breaking point. Maybe it'll be the empty shelves that do it and not the Intel issues. Maybe it'll be the Signal app from Israel being hacked. Maybe it'll be those things. You don't know. So you can't look at this and say, look, the Republicans never do the right thing. They don't until they do. It's like passing stuff in Congress, the old-fashioned no, yes. Nothing happens till it happens. And Warner may be right, and some of these people may be ready to turn. On the other hand, the critics may be right, and Republicans will never turn. We don't know. So we're going to have to step back and watch a little bit, which is really frustrating. But Warner says, from talking to insiders, they're upset about this.
Yes.
So I don't know what that means. Sternly worded letter like Chuck Schumer. When you play the old-fashioned politics, somehow or other you think that's enough. We know it's not. That's why people are mad at Schumer. That's why people are mad at Durbin. That's why people are mad at people like Warner. On the other hand, sometimes that's how you get stuff done.
Yeah,
you sort of lead them along slowly, and you don't vilify them in public, and you actually get them to come out and join you on certain and such things.
Well, we'll see whether any of that happens. And I don't know if it will be necessarily attributable to that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not too upset by the style of language that's sort of ingrained in the heads of politicians who've been around.
It
long
is.
enough.
I mean, you can't do anything about that. It's just the way they speak.
It sucks
you
that
can't
they say that.
Retrain them after 30 years.
That's true, and it is sad because of plenty of Republicans who are trained in the opposite, and no reflexive.
You can't retrain them
to
either,
say.
unfortunately. So you just have to get rid of them.
That's true. Okay. Well, all right. Well, all I can do is say, yeah. I mean, it's nice that there are some people who have some hope that Republicans may come around, but this is really all you can do is to
Yeah, I
keep
mean,
an
I
eye
don't
on
want
that
you to
and
hang your
hope
hat
for
on it, but I do want you to hear it. People
Yeah.
are saying that.
And there is no other real, no other constitutional way out of this other than you have to remind yourself every once in a while. I know that Republicans are probably just not going to break with them. They're afraid to break with them. They'll never do it in time to make any difference. But that's the truth of the matter, that we have the tools, we have the mechanisms to deal with somebody who's, essentially mentally incompetent to the job and is wildly corrupt at the same time.
And what would be that mechanism, and which organization, which trade union, which guild would attend to that?
It's Congress. It's impeachment and removal from office. And we know that they won't do that, but it's helpful. It is a little bit discouraging to see people then say, but it'll never happen, or it's a nullity. Well, that's all true, but remember that's how it's supposed to be. The people who are doing this to you are those guys. The Republicans in Congress are the ones doing this, allowing Trump to do this to you. Trump comes up with dumb ideas, but the reason that no one will stop the Mad King, that starts and stops with Republicans in Congress.
We have an election in 2026. Typically, the out-of-power party gains the House.
Yeah.
I'm telling you now, if Democrats gain the House, they're going to impeach Trump. They don't want to talk about it.
Yes.
Hakeem Jeffries absolutely doesn't want to talk about it, just like Pelosi didn't want to talk about it. The reason is they don't want to give sound bites to Fox.
Right.
For all of these people who are going to lose to therefore run on, you better vote for me because they're going to impeach Trump if the other guy wins.
Yeah, now they will figure that out.
What they think is an argument not to, by then is going to be an argument to vote for the other guy.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
But it's too early. It's too early to do that now. You got to wait for those empty shelves. You got to wait for other things to happen.
It's probably wise
that's
to
in the case. I'm just saying, you're right. There's a mechanism. The Guild can impeach him. I think they will if Democrats win. The really intriguing question is going to be, is it something the Democrats don't want to talk about when the election gets closer, or is it something the Democrats absolutely want to talk about when the election gets closer?
Yes.
You'll have Al Green and AOC and other people who want to talk about impeachment. You'll have people like Hakeem Jeffries and some of the more traditional-minded Democrats not want to talk about it. That'll be a really interesting argument because having that argument in public means you're talking about it. So I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay, that's true. That's a good point, too. I just want to say right from the get-go, I don't want to spend any time talking about impeaching the president. It would be unwise at this juncture to talk about the necessity of removing him from office. I certainly don't want to talk
about impeachment or the fact that we have enough votes to do it. The point is... Right. And look, I mean, I got these 9 reasons right here why people might want to, but I don't want to talk about it.
Right. Well, I'm sure they won't want to talk about 1 through 8, which I'll tell you so that you'll know that I'm right, that people don't want to talk about it. And then I'll give you the 9th one.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, okay. I hope it works that way.
And if you're unclear and we need better messaging, I'm just going to talk to that guy at the Port of L.A. He'll explain it to you.
Yeah, there are definitely people, just like there are people who are trained on the Democratic side to refer to my Republican friends, et cetera, and it's just an unbreakable habit. There's also, you don't go into an election a year out saying, the gigantic constitutional crisis, that's what we're running on. It will be that, but now you say, you just want eggs, pencils,
right.
Dolls.
So, do you remember that there was a Canadian election?
Yes.
And do you remember that Pierre Poilievre, who is the conservative, not only lost the election he thought he was going to win, but he also lost his seat?
Right. He's not even that. Yeah, I remember
all that stuff.
Sure, it was.
Well, guess what? The same thing happened in Australia.
Blimey again.
Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is on track to form a majority government powered by a backlash to U.S.-style MAGA politics.
Yeah.
And the conservative leader, Peter Dutton, has been the opposition leader for 3 years. He's hard right.
Oh.
Now, this is going to be confusing. Liberal parties in capital letters.
All right.
And it's often referred to as the conservative small c Liberal Party.
Okay.
Because the Liberal Party in Australia are the conservatives.
Huh.
Labour.
Yes.
Is our people.
Okay, that's
or
at
as
least
you might say,
got a
overseas
parallel.
labor are our people.
Yes, they do say it that way, and that has the parallel in the UK. So we understand labor. The Liberal Party is the Conservatives because it's the Southern Hemisphere, and the toilets flush the opposite direction.
So Peter Dutton, who thought he was going to be the next prime minister because the Liberal Party thought they were going to win, the Labor Party thought that who were in power were afraid they were going to lose. Trump comes along. Dutton speaks like a MAGA guy.
But
his party loses the election, and he loses his parliament seat.
Oh, well.
Just like
really?
Pierre Poilievre.
Wow, okay.
This article is how Trump lost conservatives in the Australian election from Politico. It was the U.S. president's increasingly unpopularity in Australia that really hurt Dutton's image, the guy that lost.
Yeah.
But I also have this article from the New York Times, and this is all in the pundit roundup. And let me give them to you.
New York Times.
I'm putting them in the team chats because that's like the easiest place to put everything.
Oh, okay.
And here there's the Political article, and here's the New York Times article. And the New York Times article is a new trend in global elections, the anti-Trump bump. I mean, for those of you who are just frustrated that nothing's happening, everything is happening. It's just on a global scale, and it's moving slowly, but all the parts are coming into place. In voting in Canada and Australia, right-wing parties that borrowed from the MAGA playbook were punished. Elsewhere, President Trump is having a more complex impact. It's the New York Times. They have to suck up to him, because that's part of what they do. In both countries, before Mr. Trump was inaugurated, the center-left ruling parties have been in poor shape and appear poised to lose power. That is Canada and Australia. Canada and Australia had huge Trump effects. The front-runners in polls were the conservative parties whose leaders flirted with Trumpian politics in style and in substance. Within weeks following Trump's return to power, the Canadian and Australian political scenarios flipped in the same way. The center-left incumbent surged ahead and went on to win, and both countries' conservative leaders lost not just the elections, they lost their own seats in parliament.
That's really something. I don't know how often that happens, but
it's amazing, isn't it?
It's astonishing.
It happens once every 25 years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I'm used to seeing here, party control of Congress changes, but the previous speaker usually, unless they're already retiring, they're around, and we very frequently go through that transition. Used to, anyway. But you just become minority leader. But
right. Charles Edale, the Australia chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a think tank. I don't know if every country gets a chair. I don't know if there's a Sri Lankan chair, for example.
No, they just
called the election in Australia a blowout, and he suggested that it had resulted, at least in part, from Mr. Trump's implicit intrusion into the election, even if it had been mostly focused on domestic issues. There were enough similarities to the Canadian election to suggest that the conservatives' fortunes fell as Trump's tariffs and attacks on America's allies ramp up. Now, this is interesting in the sense that it has implications for Intel, Five Eyes, the alliances that Canada and UK get into with the US, which are now compromised because Trump is compromising everything. And so you wonder, are Canadians going to join the European Union? Is Australia going to join the European Union? That's inconceivable. Look where they are. Yeah, but everything's changing. Everything is changing.
Yeah. Right. Tariffs changing,
and you got
to
take it from Mark Carney in Canada. They even mentioned Mr. Carney's hockey-inspired anti-Trump slogan, "Elbows up." That's what the world is doing.
Yeah. Well, everybody has to be on their guard.
I'm going to have my elbows up, so when you come and try and check me, it's going to go right in your mouth. How do you like that?
How
do you like them apples?
It's very unnerving for everyone. Everybody has we've been at the center of everybody's world and everybody's alliances, or we were the central enemy.
The incumbents were helped in Singapore as well. Last month, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong said in Parliament that Singapore would sustain a bigger hit from the new American tariffs because of its reliance on global trade, and told them to brace for more shocks. So there's a lot going on.
Interesting. Because our election and shortly thereafter, the big international analysis trend was, horrible outcomes for the incumbents. Incumbent party is in big trouble. And now I guess everybody now is saying it's no longer a question about the devil you know versus the devil you don't. Absolutely stick with the one you know. If you have a normal-ish life at this point in this country, stick with what you've got, because whoever is trying to change that is probably trying to do it from the Trumpy side of the ledger, because it looks like that's on the upswing. Well, 6 months later, it's not. It's a huge liability.
Well, it's unclear. I mean, the Conservatives and Nigel Farage's party seem to be gaining a little traction in the UK, even though they lost the election. Oh, and by the way, just parenthetically, for those of you listening at home, why doesn't Craig just mute that phone when it starts ringing like that? And the answer is because we're on Zoom. And finding the mute button is on the other screen, because it's always on the other screen.
Well, I'll tell you, like Zoom's noise suppression seems to be working pretty well, because I can usually tell what's happening just because of the odd breaks we're getting in the audio, but it's a lot less noisy. Skype was would.
So you can't sing along with My Washing Machine or
no, I haven't heard that either. But yeah, the ringing of the phone, like I don't think I've heard the ringing. I just realized, okay, that's what's happening here. Every time we get those, every 2 seconds, things go silent. It's the phone being edited out by hand.
And it's timed. You can time it.
Right.
I get 4 rings before it shuts up, and so you can time those breaks. Anyway, that's what's going on there.
All right,
it's fun.
It's fine
because Zoom is just so easy for the consumer to use.
It's going to take some getting used to for sure, as is this Teams thing, and it looks like I'm going to have another 17 devices going that'll at least tell me who's trying to talk to me when, and whether I can look at it or not.
Yeah, but not why. It won't tell you why. That's the whole problem.
No one knows why.
Why do you want to talk to me? Why are you calling me?
Why are you listening to me at all? Okay, so let's see. Any other craziness? I think we hit most
of a lot of craziness. In fact,
but what
speaking of craziness,
quick crazy,
My Saturday story, my Saturday pundit roundup was Trump's cognitive state really should be a bigger story.
You think so? Yes.
Stephen Robinson writing in Public Notice, Trump's brain is gone. It really should be a bigger story.
Wow.
His interviews with Time and The Atlantic revealed a president who's completely unhinged and incoherent. Sadly, that's not news, but what stood out is Trump is consistently confused and disconnected. Like some of those interviews you mentioned at the opening, right? He's getting interviewed on the regular big NBC parent channel, like Kristen Welker and Meet the Press or some other settings, and he's asked about whether or not what he's doing is illegal, and his answer is basically, I don't know. You got to talk to my lawyers. I got a lot of smart lawyers, I don't know.
Yeah, that was the big clip from that one was, your immigration policies are being struck down left and right. If the Supreme Court rules against you, don't you have to listen to them? Don't you have an obligation to uphold the Constitution? I don't know. I have brilliant lawyers, and they interpret these things very differently than you are interpreting them. And this may or may not be a reference to the this may or may not be a reference to the idea. They may be losing in
court, but they're brilliant, and therefore I'm going with them, not the judges.
Essentially. And this may have something to do with we all think Stephen Miller, because he went on the air and said it, and this is maybe how he communicates with Trump most often over the air, just went on TV, and when they had lost 9-0 decision in front of the Supreme Court, just said, we had a 9-0 victory. The other side is completely wrong. Not, this is entirely the opposite of what had been ruled there. So Trump takes what he hears and thinks he won that case 9-0. He thinks he wins all the cases, because he doesn't read them. He wouldn't know what to do with it if they handed him the decision. So they just tell him, you won. You get to do what you want. Well, my brilliant lawyers are winning all the time. Most people think that there's no such thing as complete presidential immunity. But my lawyers were brilliant, and they got it. And unfortunately, in that sense, they did. But yeah, he doesn't know what the state of the law is.
He doesn't know anything. Stephen Robinson points out, Trump's always been an ignoramus.
Yes.
who masks his intellectual shortcomings with bombast and declarations of his own brilliance. But his rambling, nonsensical responses to these latest interviews should set off alarms, especially in light of all the media attention and scrutiny Biden got.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. I can't understand how that was the end-all, be-all about Biden, and it was highly questionable. And even if you want to give Trump the benefit of the doubt and say this too is highly questionable, it is not. But if you want to, then fine. Where's my stories? Because there was lots of stories about the highly questionable mental decline of Biden, and then he left and said, "I'm not going to run for president." Still, that didn't end the stories. This man has 3 years left in his term, and they won't ask this question. Although you're starting to see some journalists talk about it, and some more prominently than others, certainly, but
right.
It really needs to be the case. And I'm amazed that the major journalistic outlets that land these interviews don't use the publication of the interviews to raise that issue, to sell that story.
They're afraid of him. They're still afraid of him.
Yes, that's all there really is to it. So we have, the answers are crazy. The idea of a president of the United States who explicitly swears an oath to uphold the Constitution is asked, do you need to uphold the Constitution? I don't know. And it's, I guess there's almost a germ of truth in that there too. I don't know. They keep saying I do, but my lawyers keep proving that I don't.
Right.
So maybe you're right.
I'm on the Zoom workplace page where you get team chat, and I can leave you notes that are permanent and won't disappear.
Okay.
And I just sent you a gift copy. I'm very pleased to see that Foreign Policy, the magazine, now has gift subscription, not gift subscriptions, but gift article.
Yeah, like some of the other.
So that even though it's behind a paywall, you get to read it. So I just sent you a free clip.
Excellent.
And it's not the most important thing in the world because he's an empty suit, but it's Marco Rubio's Soulless Crusade. And one of the interesting things about Rubio, because there are very few interesting things about Rubio, is that I've seen a couple of journalists refer to him in the same breath as Henry Kissinger, who, as much as you dislike Henry the K, had stature.
Yes.
Because he was Secretary of State and National Security Advisor at the same time. Well, so is Rubio. Rubio is so far below Kissinger in terms of intellectual capacity and ability that it's ridiculous to mention them in the same.
Well, how dare you? How dare you even refer to Henry Kissinger in the same breath? Because he only had 2 jobs at once.
Yeah.
Whereas Marco Rubio is 100% smarter than that. And that's why
Rubio hasn't elevated himself to the same kind of war criminal that Kissinger was in any way, shape, or form. He can't hold a candle to Kissinger.
Right, unless, of course, we uncover all of this, all the people being shipped to El Salvador as legitimate, straight-up human trafficking. And now you'll have a case. But
so they say, traditionally, secretaries of state have played a role of great prominence in U.S. administrations. Although they're only 4th in the presidential order of succession, which is still pretty good. Most people aren't in it at all. These officials often outshine vice presidents. One need only think of Henry Kissinger, James Baker, Hillary Clinton, John Kerry, to recall how influential and vocal public servants in this office can be against this backdrop. Marco Rubio.
Right. And by the way, he's looking worse and worse every day. I mean, you can see that the job is taking a toll on him, and I don't know whether it's because it's bothering his conscience or that's just, that's the death of the conscience is what you're
there
witnessing.
Never was a conscience. He was always an empty suit.
He always seemed to be, but you kind of had some idea where he was coming from, and now it's just, I don't know, I guess whatever Trump says.
I mean, go back, what is it, the Gang of 6 or the Gang of 8 or the Gang
29,
of 9.5
14,
or whatever it was.
Yeah,
as soon as you oppose him, he folds like a
origami that's true. But there's just been so much happening in terms of here's a quote from Marco Rubio saying, I absolutely 100% to my core believe this. I am now
Bobby
not
Jindal,
doing
the
it.
future of the Republican Party. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's I would say it's been sad to watch his decline, but I don't actually care about his decline.
The decline implies he was someplace to decline.
That's true, too. And
during his first months in the job,
cliff.
Rubio has instead appeared as a diminished figure and slavish latter-day convert to the Trump worldview, even when it goes strongly against his own extensive record of foreign policy positions.
Yes, exactly.
One of the first clear signs of this was Rubio's stupefied demeanor during Trump's unprecedented public upbraiding of Vladimir Zelensky. As Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance angrily rebuked Zelensky, a sullen-looking Rubio hunched beside Vance, sinking into the couch like a character in the movie Get Out.
Oh.
This is really, this is foreign policy. This is the establishment. This is regular people who work in this field looking at Rubio and saying, what a loser.
The Secretary of State. Like sometimes they often emerge as presidential candidates later on. And he's been one. But yeah, he's just, wow. And you can see it on his face. This picture they've illustrated this piece with, he's gone dead-eyed and pallid and good. I don't know. I mean, what can I tell you? He's awful.
Dan Pfeiffer has this note. Why Trump's efforts to blame Biden for the economy are doomed to fail.
Oh, my. Yes.
I mean, he'll try it.
Doesn't make any sense.
I said a long time ago that Biden should have blamed Trump, and there was time for that. Now is not the time, because what Trump is doing clearly his own. He owns it. It's my economy when it goes up, and it's Biden's economy the next day when it goes down. And so, it just doesn't work.
He made that explicit during one of the high-profile interviews, and it might have been the Kristen Welker one, where they said, you've said that this is the Biden economy. And like last week, he said, the first quarter is down, and that's really the Biden. It's a hangover economy. I would say even a lot of the second quarter, when it comes, is going to be Biden. So she says, well, when does it become the Trump economy? And he says, well, I think it is. I think it is now, at least partially. The parts of it that are good, I think, are the Trump economy, and the parts of it that are bad, I think, are the Biden economy. He just straight up said it, and people were right. This is beyond parody now. Sorry. Okay. Man, there was a lot. There's still more. I don't know where I'm going to get my pencils. Thank you, Greg, for coming by, and it took us all the way to the hour once again. I can't thank you enough.
That's pretty good for a Monday.
It sure is. All right, we'll try it again on Wednesday.
Okay, let's.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. And, man, there's an awful lot. Still, I'm going to have to now thumb through and say, all right, which ones did we do already and which ones did we not, is the big question here. Okay, let's see what's going on. Oh, you know what? This would be a good opportunity since we haven't gotten straight back into our work here. I have a list waiting of, and it goes back some ways, but I'm reminded now by a new Patreon subscriber, Andrew Schmidt, joining us just the other day as a new subscriber. Reminds me that I've had waiting in the wings here a couple of you, one other new subscriber, and a few of you who have boosted your contributions, for which I thank you tremendously. I appreciate all of these things. It helps justify spending our days this way. But this goes back to early April. I wrote it down, and the card that I keep it on gets buried by other stories daily. But and this depends greatly on how you guys choose to identify yourself in the Patreon sign up. So so be aware of that. And by the way, if you sign up and if at any point you say, please don't mention my name or call me Shirley or whatever it is you need to do, there's plenty of messaging opportunity there. And the way you sign up for Patreon makes a difference. But we'll try and reflect your sign up name the best we can anyway. But so Ken, thank you, Ken, for being one of the new subscribers. That was all the way back on April 6th. So if you've been waiting all this time to get your acknowledgement, I've been feeling bad about it the whole time, if that helps. Sally boosted her contribution on the same day, April 6th, and still has not yet been acknowledged. But now we're catching up, along with boosts from Val Jostock and John Marzolino, who were on the 12th, April 12th, and May 2nd. We're at least not too far off the mark with John's boost to the contribution. Thank you very much. I can't tell you how much you appreciate it, and I can't tell you how much I hate doing the promotion that it takes to make this to make this more routine for people and to bring in more subscribers. It's very tough on me for some reason to do this. And you know what? Now here, an excellent point made by production and editing staff who are much more social media and podcast savvy, I guess, just generally speaking, than I am, pointing out, and I know you're not going to like this, but, and as they pointed out to me, and I know you're probably not going to like it, but a lot of you actually absorbed the lesson earlier on when I made one mention of it when Scott was urging me to do the same thing. Whenever I sit down and watch something on YouTube, for whatever reason, I've watched something, it does kind of drive me crazy. And it probably drives you crazy, the same thing. If you just happened upon something, I just want to watch this one video. But you watch it and the person is like, now just a reminder, everybody go down there and hit the like button and subscribe and you'll never miss it when I put out a new episode. And I keep thinking, if I'm a regular listener to something, I'm probably not going to miss a new episode. I probably don't need to subscribe necessarily to know when there's a new episode, particularly if it's, every Wednesday these episodes come out, or every day these episodes come out. So I can't imagine depending on that to remind me that, hey, the day has changed and it's time to catch up again. But whatever. But as it turns out, it's just important algorithmically, and we all hate the algorithms, etc. But actually it makes a significant difference. So I gotta apparently experiment with this. A thing you can do that doesn't cost you any more money is wherever you get this podcast, from wherever you download it, and especially if it is, YouTube, Libsyn, Patreon, whatever, these things are algorithmic too. If you're just, I don't care whether you actually like every episode, hit the button that you liked every episode. I don't know. It seems like nothing. But then again, the effort really is nothing. And I don't know. Apparently what happens with the algorithms, particularly in places like YouTube, is it just simply counts that. It doesn't care if you really meant it, whether or not you liked the episode. It doesn't care whether you really heartily recommend it or not. It just counts the thing. So, if there are only 15 people downloading it on YouTube for whatever reason, but if only one person every once in a while says, oh yeah, right, the like button, versus every day you're all hitting the like button, it does a little something. And that little something is what? I don't know. It's now the trend line is up on the likes. So they start algorithmically pushing it to other people. I don't know how they decide who to push it to, but eventually somebody's going to be like, this thing keeps popping up in my recommended thing. And although to me, if I'm on YouTube and it says, here's what's recommended for you, I'm actually actively angry about it. I'm not watching it. I'm not. Why? Because you recommended. Although, truthfully, things sneak through. All right, fine. Actually, that looks interesting. So I'll, whatever. And that's probably what's driving some of the other things that I really just can't stand seeing on YouTube, but it really works, is the graphic presentation. We really should be thinking about, okay, I know we don't have video for our production and I don't want any part of it, but when people put together some other visual representation, especially if they have, lettering on a screenshot from their podcast, and apparently the thing that works the most, for whatever reason, even though it too makes me actively annoyed and I don't want to listen to things, is it doesn't even matter whether it's true or not, right? If I just put in big red and yellow explosive lettering, listen to so-and-so absolutely destroy Trump, or LOL, Rubio should hide his head in shame after this, and it doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't even matter really whether there's any content about Rubio and that you put that on there, people are clicking on it. I can't go that far, but if you click the like enough, it gets fed to somebody who finally says, what the hell is this thing? And they hit the button and then they like it. And then more and more it grows like that. Then they become listeners, subscribers. God only knows. The only way we're going to grow the show is to, in Trump world, the only way to do this is to expose yourself. That's the Trump credo. So by all means, if you're picking up the show every day from wherever you're doing it, I guess, I don't know how I have to say it, hit the like button, hit whatever buttons there are to make it look like lots and lots of people like the show. You're not kidding either. If you're listening and you're there, you can hit that button. You do like the show. You're not lying. When I don't know what it is, more people like it, they recommend it to more people. People that say, I don't know, it's showing up in my feed, or it showed up in my feed. I've ignored it 5 times, but this time I'm going to click on it. I'm curious what it is. Maybe we'll have to go and get some kind of design game going that will say, to give the kind of stupid graphical and letter graphical art card teases of something that may or may not have happened in the show. I don't know. But it starts with the likes and it starts with the subscriptions. And ultimately, we hope it winds up with actual financial support subscriptions through Patreon, through the Cash App, through PayPal, whatever methodology you may prefer. I think we got the ground covered and all that. And we take checks. How do you like that? That's pretty old-fashioned. We figured out a way to do that as well. So that's my plea to you. I got to think of a more organized and succinct way of doing it, but and be less apologetic about it. But apparently, as stupid as it looks, as stupid as it sounds, as stupid as it feels, the reason that all these other stupid-sounding people are always saying, remember to hit the like button and subscribe, is because, as dumb as it is, it makes things happen. I likened it, and I guess by way of excuse, how do I feel better about doing something stupid like this? When I have described to you in the past the mechanism by which it is most accurate and effective to predict leadership races in the House of Representatives, right? And I've always said these things are just, they may be treated even by some of the people voting in these things as ideological, but what generally determines the outcome, even if this isn't the motivating factor, what generally determines the outcome is the amount of money that's collected for a leadership PAC and distributed to other members. And the number of members with whom you're successful in getting them elected to the House is the number of members who feel obligated to support you in leadership races, whether or not you have a direct compatibility in ideology or not. And that's not to say that that's what's motivating the choice, but it's a pretty good predictor, and it may just be an accident. But there's a reason to think that it would be something other than an accident. Anyway, what I was saying is, as silly as it is, and as dumb and actually counterproductive as it is, particularly for people who say that money is the poisonous presence in politics, and it does the wrong things in politics. I keep thinking about activist members like AOC and saying, it feels weird and bad and counterintuitive to kind of what we think about money in politics, but it is sort of one weird trick that can actually make it happen. Well, you just go and do it, right? You say, this game is playable. If you've got the fundraising ability, and not everybody does, but if you've got that kind of magnetic fundraising ability the way she does, she can go and raise money nationally and turn it straight into power. It's really actually doable. There's work that goes along with it, but it's kind of like loading the algorithm, right? It feels weird, but raising money for a leadership PAC and spending it in elections is actually a very direct path to leadership power in Congress. Well, as it turns out, telling people to like your show and hit the like button, hit the recommend button, whatever button it is on whatever platform you're on, and to subscribe, et cetera, actually does, give you the outcome you're looking for eventually, as weird and as indirect as it seems. So there you go. Go and do that. And while you're working on it, I'll tell you more news. There is other stuff. Bloomberg has another story that I guess we got to throw into the mix here. It seems like, all the time that we've spent on how dangerous it is that Trump is reorganizing very important parts of the Department of Justice and politicizing the Department of Justice. The Ed Martin saga is more and more ridiculous every day. He's still writing threatening letters to everybody that he thinks Trump might not like, just, purporting to be launching an investigation. Into what? I don't know. I mean, we know who, and we know what he says he's investigating. But for instance, I saw this morning, and I didn't grab it, and now I wish I did, and I'll have to make a note to myself that he sent another letter to Georgetown University, somebody he threatened already, and basically sent them a letter saying, I understand you're still teaching DEI, which no one even knows what that's supposed to mean. I am launching an investigation into this, and there's really no grounds whatsoever for the U.S. attorney, whether, a real U.S. attorney or an acting U.S. attorney or the interim U.S. attorney, to be launching an investigation into what they're teaching at Georgetown. But he continues to do it. And we have talked about the danger of the dismantling of the Civil Rights Division and the voting section and all of what goes along with it. A new thing that is being dissolved. You'll be able to see the import of it, I think, pretty readily, given how we discuss Trump daily here. The Bloomberg headline, Trump team set to dissolve Reagan-era transnational crime unit. Now, that's not just focused on Reagan-era transnational crime. It is all transnational crime, but having been organized during the Reagan era, which is really rather surprising. But anyway, the task forces that specialize in fighting organized crime, bad, right? Drug cartels. I thought we hated the drug cartels. We were about to go to war with Mexico once again over drug cartels. That was another of the outgrowths of the wild weekend. Trump spent part of the weekend once again saber rattling with Canada, Greenland, and now Mexico, criticizing the Mexican president and taking her to task because she had rejected the suggestion that he made. What suggestion was it? Send more avocados? No. It was, why don't you allow U.S. troops into Mexico? To fight the drug cartels, allegedly. But, why don't you allow us to invade you militarily? No, I think that's probably a poor idea. Well, how dare you? You're so dumb not letting us put our troops in your country. Like, wow. Oh, stop trying to start a war with our neighbors, our friends. We have generally good relationships with our neighbors and have had, and a lot of our success has been based on the fact that we're not in constant tension with those with whom we share borders. And there aren't that many with whom we share borders. And those with whom we do share borders, not only are we doing well in good relations with them, but we have more or less free trade with them, as was at one point considered to be a good idea, even if the implementation of it was less than ideal. And billionaires who stood to become near trillionaires didn't do us any favors as regular people in exploiting the free trade. Somewhat different subject. So here we are. Task forces that specialize in fighting organized crime. That's him. Drug cartels and human traffickers. And remember when he used to tell stories of that all the time? You see it all the time on the Mexican border. We got to stop these horrible people. They've got people tied up with duct tape and they're in the cars and they're human traffickers. So why eliminate the part of the DOJ that targets that? I don't know. Because national security, movies, Alcatraz, pencils, dolls. Tell me he's mentally stable. Well, anyway, this section the Transnational Crime Unit, was told to shut down by September 30th. That, of course, is the end of the fiscal year, which I guess means that the Trump budget will have $0 for this group in next year's budget, which I guess we'll learn about in the next few weeks. This all according to documents and people familiar with the matter. And if you're, not familiar with the matter, well, to hell with you. We don't really need to hear you. But I don't. Let's see. How come when I opened this on my phone before the show started, everything was cool, but now that I'm trying to open it on the desktop, not so much. Let's see if I can open it on the phone and read it from there. It is a Jason Leopold story, and he was circulating a gift link to it. And I guess maybe you can only open it from your IP only once. So back to the phone for this one. Here's the story. The Trump administration is, quote, decommissioning. That's an interesting new terminology for it. That's why he's included in scare quotes here. Eliminating. Yeah, I'm sure that was what they were thinking of. And that's the end result that they want. But I guess it gets them into trouble with appropriators if the Appropriations Committee still plans to appropriate money for this group and they say that it is authorized and we've appropriated funds for it. How do you stop it from operating without, or allegedly without running afoul of impoundment laws? And I guess the answer is I'm decommissioning it. I'll defund it and it'll exist. It's just that no one will do any of the work there because there's no way to earn money and a living doing it. All right. The Trump administration is decommissioning a Department of Justice unit that has long been at the center of dismantling transnational organized crime networks, drug cartels, and human trafficking rings. Leaders of the unit, called the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces, or OCDETF. Do people really say it that way? Were told that they had until September 30th to shut down operations. People familiar with the matter said. The people asked not to be identified, citing concerns over potential retribution, of course. An email sent last Monday by a DOJ budget analyst to a counterpart at OCDETF, goodness, said that the unit's fiscal year 2026 budget would be, quote, zeroed out. Yeah, that's the answer. And the independent office dissolved, according to records obtained by Bloomberg News in response to a Freedom of Information Act request and the people familiar with the matter. A reason wasn't specified in the documents, and it's unclear who was responsible for making the decision. A DOJ spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment. DOJ wouldn't necessarily know, but... And, if you were able to ask Pam Bondi about it, she would say it was a decision made at the cabinet level, or the president instructed me to, or whatever. The real questions should be put in Congress, but they're not going to give you answers either. The news comes as the Trump administration is issuing broad cuts across the entire federal government, with many departments from the Environmental Protection Agency to Housing and Urban Development seeing their budgets dramatically reduced. On Friday, the White House released the administration's budget request for 2026. It proposed cuts across the federal government totaling $163 billion. And I think, there's a lot of legislative maneuvering going on here that I think is, the numbers, are very familiar and very similar. The $163 billion, which I think is about where they now put the claims for the Dodgy Boys work in terms of finding quote unquote savings in the federal budget. And so I think what's happening in part here is where previously it was illegal and unconstitutional impoundment for the president to say, okay, I accept this list of things from Dodgy as being waste, fraud, and abuse, whatever, however you want to define it. And I want the spending on it to stop. Well, you can't because that money has already been appropriated, and for you to stop it is illegal impoundment. Well, okay, I'll tell you what. For one thing, going forward next year, take that out of the budget. Then if we don't spend it, it's not me impounding it, it's you making a budget decision. As for what happens to the money now, that'll bring us to another subject at some point in the future, which Josh Marshall at TPM is just now starting to pay attention to, and a wise choice on his part to make it an issue. How do you deal with the money already appropriated, which is subject to the accusation that it's in an unconstitutional impoundment when Trump stops the spending? And the answer is the president can make a recommendation to Congress that they rescind that funding. All right, it's not me stopping it. It's me saying, I recommend that you stop it. Now, P.S., in the meantime, I've stopped it, which is still illegal, but a way for essentially to legalize it after the fact would be for you to pass a rescissions bill saying, oh, for some strange reason we changed our mind and the money that was appropriated, we don't want to be appropriated anymore, and therefore this is not on you anymore. It's no longer an illegal impoundment. It's our making a rescission choice. So there are some other dynamics that feed into it that we'll get to later. In the meantime, let me tell you more about this weird decision by international criminal syndicate leader Donald Trump to eliminate the part of the Department of Justice that investigates international crime syndicates. The DOJ is one agency facing steep cuts, among many, of course. The administration recommended slashing its budget by nearly 8% to $33.2 billion, including eliminating $1 billion in grants to some programs the White House called, quote, woke and radical. The FBI and the ATF would see a combined $1 billion in cuts. Draining OCD ETF's budget was not included in the White House proposal sent to Congress. That's pretty interesting. I didn't realize. I thought that they were saying that's where it came from, but apparently not. Maybe it's just a favor I would like it if somebody did for us over there in Congress. Over the past 2 fiscal years, the unit's investigations and prosecutions have netted more than $2 billion in proceeds seized and forfeited from criminal networks, according to the Government Accountability Office. But its 2025 budget was just $550 million, a $17 million increase over 2024. I don't know why it's put as just. Its 2025 budget was just $550 million. Okay. I guess versus the $2 billion that it seizes, which purely on the issue of what's on the books, you might say, why would you, out of all things, eliminate a Department of Justice office or program that actually generates income for the federal government in the form of seizures and forfeits from criminal networks? But then, in order to tell the whole story, you'd have to include the story of how often that is done unjustly and without justification. And sometimes it's a good collar and you're seizing the right stuff, and sometimes you're just stealing money from people. Like, yes, they're sometimes actually suspected of crimes, and sometimes those crimes don't actually mandate forfeiture, and sometimes it's forfeiture that happens and then people get cleared of the crimes and yet for some reason don't get their assets back. There's a whole background to criminal forfeiture that we all need to read up about in order to decide, yeah, that's a net good. Not quite ready to do that. Established, though, this division is in 1982 by President Ronald Reagan. The unit's task forces are made up of hundreds of prosecutors and thousands of intelligence and law enforcement personnel from across the federal government. They work jointly on investigations that seek to combat illicit finance and take down international drug trafficking organizations. Stop them from throwing drugs over the fence and hitting you in the head. The task force played a role in the 2019 capture of Sinaloa cartel leader Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. Yes, the program's crown jewel, that term keeps coming up, is its sprawling fusion center located in Virginia. And remember, that too has been a controversial thing, and there will certainly be those among us progressives who say, well, actually, maybe getting rid of fusion centers is not all that bad. But the multi-million-dollar classified facility houses reams of intelligence and financial data that investigators and prosecutors use to build mosaics on individuals and criminal networks they've targeted. The DOJ budget analyst's April 28th email said the fusion center would be closed. Between it and the task force's main office, the operation employs about 40 people whose jobs are now in jeopardy. I'm not chiefly worried about the jobs there. Although I guess one big question you might ask is, what happens to all the data? And I'm sure that somewhere along the line the answer is Elon Musk steals it and uses it for whatever illicit purposes he wants. Is it good thing on net that they now won't be collecting more such information? Well, I'm sure it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, golly, it's frightening that they collect all that information on people who may or may not be involved in crime. But on the other hand, it's easy to see also, hey, that might come in handy one day in preventing a terroristic tragedy of some kind. Staff members had been bracing for some cuts. A few weeks earlier, officials, including Thomas Padden, the task force's acting director. Did you know there was an acting director? Yes. Had been told by the White House's OMB that, more alphabet soup, that OCDETF's spending for 2026 would be cut by more than half. In April, the office was given an opportunity to appeal the decision, which it did, according to emails and people familiar with the matter. But I guess they didn't quite help themselves up over the top with that one. All right, we'll be back after this 2-minute break with the rest of this story. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Well, lots happening here. I do have to get back to that story here. I'm going to have to look into this one. How do you like this? I got notice from Patreon just now saying, well, I've never seen it put quite this way. Normally they just say, hey, it's that time of the month again. Time for us to disperse your contributions to you in your monthly payment. To clear out the account, here's what we've collected for you from your subscribers for the month. Boom. And it's usually, that's it. You know, like the payment's been made and you should see it in your account within days. Today, this one says, withdrawal successfully initiated, which sounds good, but a little stilted. And then this note, we know you're excited, but please sit tight as we transfer your payment. Because of the volume you've processed, which I guess would be a good thing, right? We are running a few checks on your account, and you can expect to receive your payment within 10 business days. We'll send you an email when your earnings are on the way. Like, okay, it's not going to cause any significant damage, I don't think, to wait a little while to get it, but I'm just sort of curious about what this is. Now, we've had some new subscribers, and maybe there's a threshold at which, if you move from 150 to 151 or something like that, well, now we're going to check you. It sounds like a good problem to have, the volume, because of the volume you've processed. That's nice. But what about this running a few checks things? Okay. Well, I mean, we're legit, so I guess we cross our fingers and hope it checks out. But then again, lots of people who have, say, immigrated to this country where everything was legit, suddenly found themselves being put through the ringer. I don't think it has anything to do with the current administration so much as, I guess, reaching some threshold. But okay, just putting that out there. It's a dangerous time to be doing this sort of thing. And I just happened to notice that at 10:13 a.m. I got the notice of Ray Archibald subscribing to us on YouTube. And guess what? I wonder if that was you have to imagine at this point, a direct response to our imploring him and everyone else to actually go and do that. Okay, we'll see whether that makes any difference. I appreciate it. Back to the story. That's what you came for. Not, I'm going to have to turn off the alarm here too. Okay, well, working on the phone creates a certain additional level of problems here. Let's get back to the Jason Leopold story in Bloomberg about the elimination of the alphabet soup organization OCD ETF, essentially the transnational organized crime unit at the DOJ. That is to say, I know you have to clarify these things this was an organized crime unit at the Department of Justice, not the new Department of Justice where they have a pro-organized crime thing going on. So, the decision to unwind this unit completely came as a shock to the prosecutors, agents, and staff who work for the task forces, the people who are familiar with the matter said. There are thousands of active investigations, and it is unclear whether those probes will be shut down or handed over to other agencies. The answer, of course, being if you think you can hang this crime on something that you might be able to link to Democrats or other political opponents, those investigations will continue elsewhere. If they are investigations of Donald Trump himself or of Donald Trump allies, well, those will be the ones that it would be waste, fraud, or abuse to continue with, you see. The dissolution appears to be at odds with a policy goal that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche distributed widely inside the department just 2 months ago. Isn't that crazy? He said then that OCD ETF would be central to Trump's policy of ensuring the total elimination of cartels and criminal organizations as part of a new initiative called Operation Take Back America. But then when they started taking back America, they started to realize that the organized crime cartels that they were running into were in fact the Trump organization and his kids' businesses, I guess. So they were like, well, to hell with that. Operation Take Back America requires that OCD ETF surge existing resources to address the Justice Department's core enforcement priorities, which of course now will be eliminated. Why have core enforcement priorities if not to eliminate them, right? What are those supposed core enforcement priorities? Stopping illegal immigration. That still seems to be kind of central to what they're talking about, right? Eliminating cartels and TCOs, and ending illegal trafficking of dangerous drugs and human beings. Blanche wrote in a March 6th memo sent to all DOJ divisions, which, like we learned from Stalin's Russia, now you're the biggest traitor to the United States ever, sir, for carrying out the orders of your president. How dare you? It's unclear whether the agencies would or could replace the unit. In January, Trump signed an executive order, directing Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi to set up task forces in every state to take down criminal networks. Work that is, similar to OCD ETF's mandate. But we're going to send it back to the states like abortion. Okay. What are we going to do? One way we should do this, federal law will now be enforced by the states. And of course, by doing that, I don't know. No, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm wondering whether in Trump's head, he's basically saying, well, if we have the states take care of federal law, then we can have federal law cracking down on the states that were too dumb to vote for me and looking the other way in the states that were smart and voted for the future. By which I mean me. The day after receiving news that his office would be shut down, Padden, the acting director at OCD ETF, the acting director, right? I had to play. Why do we have to play acting every time we say the word acting? Well, the answer is in the name of the organization we're talking about, the OCD ETF. We know what the OCD stands for. Well, the day after receiving this news, Padden, the acting director, emailed Jolene Ann Loria. Jolene. You have to say that 5 times every time you address her in email. The Assistant Attorney General for Administration and the DOJ's Chief Financial Officer to discuss next steps. Jolene, he said, I'm writing to follow up on our conversation last Friday regarding setting a meeting with your staff and mine to discuss the process for closing down OCD ETF functions in the wake of zeroing our budget for fiscal year 2026, Patton wrote in the email under the subject line, OCD ETF decommissioning. I'd like to get guidance as soon as possible regarding the options for our employees and the vision for either the termination or transfer of OCD ETF functions and responsibilities. Thank you. I will follow up as soon as possible, Loria replied. We know her as Jolene, of course, but we're on good terms. Thus far, neither Patton nor any other official with the unit has received additional information from DOJ headquarters, 3 people familiar with the matter said, and it's really just a matter of moving to a different floor and asking that question. They just won't let you in there. In the meantime, OCD ETF is preparing to cancel building leases, shut down its information systems, and terminate contracts, people familiar with the matter said. So, to hell with enforcing the law against organized crime. That will no longer happen in the United States of America. Yay, because not only are we having political union with Russia, we are now having a merger of the transnational crime operations with Russia. And I guess that's the only way we're going to handle it. We have to ensure our business partners, just as we're frequently being told, the problem with the tariffs is it creates uncertainty for our international trading partners. If our international trading partners are international crime syndicates, we need to create stability for them in order to enable them to grow. All right. Other things that need discussion at this point. Wow. How about this piece from Greg Sargent? Always worth checking in with Greg Sargent, as he writes in the New Republic, how Trump accidentally sabotaged his own case against Abrego Garcia. Just another refresher on the Abrego Garcia situation, because I know Greg, I saw him on Blue Sky this morning fretting that people might be sort of moving past the Abrego Garcia case or forgetting about it or abandoning it. We have hit a little bit of a lull in it because there's real courtroom machinations going on, the upshot of which will revive the story, but the word on what that upshot isn't out quite yet. But in preparation for that, Greg Sargent wisely apprises us of this development. Trump has now admitted twice, once this was maybe the highlight of his sit-down interview with, who was it? I forget already. Terry Moran the other day. I thought this was the one thing with which I was crediting him with being very strategic, getting Trump on the record about this and essentially goading him with his vainglorious style to admit, I could do whatever I want. I could get him back here with the snap of my fingers. Well, why don't you? You're the president. Well, because my lawyers are working out, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'm letting the lawyers handle it. But you could just order them to do it. Right? Oh yeah, I could order them to do it. Well, he's done it twice now. And now that he has twice admitted that he could, or he thinks he could, and it may be that he's wrong or that he's lying, but it will make a difference in the case. But now that Trump has said twice that he could bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia home, but says his lawyers are telling him not to, well, this was a very dumb move and also a very revealing one. How so? Well, I'll let him tell you. He has now said it right out in the open, not once but twice, in 2 major interviews. President Donald Trump openly declared that he has the power to bring the wrongfully deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the United States. And on both occasions, Trump said straight out that he's not doing so because administration lawyers have told him he doesn't have to or that he shouldn't. This has been widely seen as an admission that Trump is defying the Supreme Court, which has directed the administration to, quote, facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. Yes, it is that. But these 2 moments are also their own story. They offer a unique glimpse into the deep rot of bad faith infesting Trump and Stephen Miller's broader project to expand the president's removal powers into something extraordinarily vast and entirely unaccountable. They also show how Trump is inadvertently sabotaging his case against Abrego Garcia, that broader project as well, with his bumbling incompetence. I'd love to take a guess at it here, but I think the smart thing to do is to read on and return to these points if I think there's something to add. Bringing him back and retrying him wouldn't bother me, Trump told Time magazine. I should have done it in his voice, admitting that he has this option. But I leave that decision to the lawyers. At this moment, they just don't want to do that. Trump was even more direct in a recent interview with ABC News. I could, Trump shrugged, when asked if he could pick up the phone and get Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele to release Abrego Garcia from the prison in that country where he is currently wasting away. And we have to put it that way because it's not even clear which prison he's in anymore. I believe he's been moved from CCOT, which I'm not certain why exactly, but it may be to just try to confound court orders later on. Anyway, if he were the gentleman you say he is, I would do that, Trump continued, but he's not. Trump added that we have lawyers that don't want to do this. That was, of course, him saying he's not the nice guy. He's not a typical Marylander dad or any of the things that supporters characterize him at. No, he's no angel. He's a bad guy. And, of course, Trump now insisting, no, he is definitely an MS-13. Those numbers are actually physically written on his fingers. No, they're not. And I think what Trump here is saying, now I feel like I have to embellish a little bit when he's saying the lawyers say we shouldn't or we couldn't or we can't, but what does that mean? What it means is now questions will arise in the lawsuits. You say you could bring him back, right? Right. You say you're not bringing him back though, right? Right. And you've said that you're being advised not to do it for whatever reason, right? Right. Okay. Who's advising you of that? Well, I'm not going to tell you. And now we'll have a fight over whether or not he has to tell. But if they can develop that part of the case and say, all right, well, for one thing, if the president is relying on all of this, like, well, we can't tell you about the contract, if any, that we have with the Salvadorans and what it says and what they do and don't have to do because it would impinge on my unitary executive sole right to run foreign policy for the country. That now runs into, well, but you're not doing that because you're just telling us if it were up to you, you could do this, but someone's telling you not to. Who is interfering with your unitary authority here and why and how and in what manner? And we want to know something about that. But let's continue with the reading here. By saying these things, Trump hasn't just revealed that he is ignoring the Supreme Court's directive. He's also opened up a new line of inquiry wide enough to drive a Tesla Cybertruck through, but not without setting it on fire. Abrego Garcia's lawyer, Simon Sandoval Moschenberg, we remember him, says he will now pursue answers to the many questions these admissions raise. This is doable because the federal district judge overseeing the case, Paula Sinis, has initiated discovery designed to reveal what steps, if any, the government has taken, as ordered, to facilitate his return, opening the way for depositions of administration officials. The president has now said on 2 occasions that he could easily bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia to the United States, but he's been told not to do so. Sandoval Moschenberg emailed me, Greg Sargent in this case. We're going to keep moving forward with the discovery process with document requests and depositions, peeling back layer after layer of the onion until we find out exactly which government officials gave him that instruction. Which lawyers have told Trump that he is not required to facilitate Abrego Garcia's return. What exactly transpired in these communications? Which top official, aside from Trump, is internally directing the lawyers to advise Trump this way? Are that official's initials S and M? Ooh, that's gross in 2 different ways. Of course, Stephen Miller, but S and M, and given how sadistic he is, maybe. Okay, I don't know if they meant to go that way. These lawyers appear to be obeying Stephen Miller and not, for one thing, not Donald Trump, but he can always say, well, I'm not ceding the decision-making authority to Stephen Miller. I'm just happen to want to do whatever he says for whatever reason. That he can do. But what's actually happening is that it is Stephen Miller telling Trump, don't obey the Supreme Court. That seems wild. That, according to Chris Newman, an attorney for the Abrego Garcia family, another of the attorneys, Miller himself should be deposed under oath in federal court to determine his role in this ongoing affront to due process. I'll agree with this much. Stephen Miller should be deposed. And he should be subject to legal process and all of this. But certainly deposed. Admittedly, it will be tough to get such answers. I mean, he can always just deny, and say, I'm not going to answer you. I refuse to answer you. Fifth Amendment if he needs to. But as David Kurtz and Josh Kovensky of Talking Points Memo detailed, Judge Sinis, who has also ordered Abrego Garcia's return, has taken a stern line against the administration's refusal to be forthcoming on what it's doing toward that end. She seems determined to establish a blow-by-blow account of the government's malfeasance, so it's plausible she will try to direct the administration to fill in unknowns about why Trump is refusing to act, given his open admission that he can do so at any time. Trump keeps saying that he has the power to bring Abrego Garcia back, but that the only hang-up is his lawyers. Roger Parloff, senior editor at Lawfare website, who has closely tracked this case, tells me, Greg, Trump is saying he can do it and he won't. I think Judge Sinis will try to get to the bottom of that. At the very least, this opens up a major new storyline for reporters to plumb, and that's why this matters. Trump's admissions along those lines and whatever more we learn about internal deliberations over this badly sabotage the administration's larger case for not bringing Abrego Garcia home. The administration keeps arguing that Trump does not have the power to command Bukele to release Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran himself. That's already a weak defense. We are paying El Salvador to hold people at Trump's pleasure, but Trump's admission that he can bring Abrego Garcia back anytime he wants makes it even weaker. If Trump genuinely conveyed to Bukele that he wants Abrego Garcia back, it would happen tomorrow. Or at least that's the way to goad him into continuing to claim this. I don't know whether it would happen tomorrow. And by the way, I should mention in passing that also parked somewhere in pocket are story developments from late last week and over the weekend in which the government is now backing away from some of these claims and insisting we don't actually have a written contract of any kind with the Salvadorans. So this idea that we're paying them, for instance, I don't know that we're paying them. This idea that we're paying them in exchange for housing these people for 1 year. I mean, they had some real specifics. The agreement is supposedly that you'll keep these people for up to a year until we can decide what to do with them pending further developments. And that's a lot of specifics for something for which there's no formal agreement. But if they just continue to insist there's no formal agreement, we never wrote it down. There was no payment, or at least, I don't know, maybe there was, maybe there wasn't. It's going to create delay and problems and proof issues in court. And every delay works to their advantage, even if it's, the fact that they're lying outright and perjuring themselves in court. Well, it's going to take you a year to prove the perjury too. But they now are saying, we did all of this. Remember, again, difficult to believe. I'm doing all this on advice of my lawyers. I could bring him back right now. I could pick up that phone and make it happen. My lawyers are advising me not to. So you're taking the advice of lawyers in this. Yes, right. That sounds smart, almost savvy, right? Okay. And so, but are you taking this advice from the same lawyers who said, let's just transfer millions and millions of dollars to El Salvador for no particular purpose? I don't think we need a contract. Let's not write things down. Are you taking notes on an MF criminal conspiracy? Well, that's a theory, right? I mean, but it's frankly pretty damning, right? What would you say about somebody who's making handshake deals for the exchange of millions of dollars and maybe millions of dollars in cash being shipped down to the president of El Salvador in exchange for God knows what, and no promises of any kind of performance or anything because there's nothing written? First of all, I would say those are not lawyers whose advice you should be following on anything, much less something like this. And I would say those are lawyers who sound like they ought to be investigated by the OCDETF which you're also dissolving at the same time. I would say actually a giant cash payment under the table with no contracts for some reason with El Salvador or the president of El Salvador, if not the government of El Salvador, in exchange for human trafficking of these people would be the kind of thing that ought to be investigated as transnational crime, but isn't. But whatever. I mean, they're actually saying, yeah, this stuff, the lack of written agreements would probably land you in court under an organized crime investigation otherwise. But their thinking is, well, nobody's going to launch that investigation into us because we control those investigators and we're firing them. But in the meantime, before that investigation would ordinarily otherwise have been ordered, we can use the claim that there's no actual written record to frustrate the civil procedure about bringing Abrego Garcia back. What is the nature of the agreement? If you say you can't bring him back, there must be some ironclad reason why. No, not really. Really? Why not? Because there's no written contract. So, you can't prove it. No written contract, and this was something you did at the advice of the attorneys who are now saying you don't have to listen to the Supreme Court also. Those are the worst attorneys ever. Really? Your defense is legal malpractice? Does that matter for us? Not really if you're the president. I mean, you can have anyone you want advising you. Okay, then answer the question. Go ahead. Yes, our defense is legal malpractice. What are you going to do? Disbar them? Well, anyway, the administration keeps arguing, as Greg Sargent puts it, that Trump does not have the power to command Bukele to release Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran himself. That's already a weak defense. We are paying El Salvador, but they're now denying it. If Trump genuinely conveyed, therefore, to Bukele that he wanted Abrego Garcia back, it would happen tomorrow. But they continue to deny even that. What's more, Greg continues, Trump and other top officials refuse to do this by insisting Abrego Garcia is a public safety menace based on his alleged MS-13 gang ties. That only comes up here as justification. Well, why won't you exercise the power you have? Well, I wouldn't, because it's a bad idea, because gang membership. How do you know that? Because this Photoshop thing. But it isn't Photoshopped, I say. Problem. The case for MS-13 ties is incredibly weak on its merits, as you know, but Trump's admission that he can bring Abrego Garcia back and retry him for removal anytime he wants makes it even weaker. Trump's rendition of him to El Salvador, which violated his withholding of removal status, was illegal. There's no reason whatsoever not to return him and then try to remove him through more lawful channels by contesting that status or deporting him to a third country as opposed to doing so illegally. Trump has now admitted that he can take this alternate path anytime he wants. So who is telling Trump not to? Who is directing that overall strategy? The more we learn along those lines, the more Trump's whole case will collapse. All this deals a blow to Trump world's arguments in a deeper sense. Miller's bigger argument is essentially that the president's powers to remove people should be above challenge and unreviewable by definition. Miller appears to want Trump to have the power to declare undocumented immigrants, or really anybody, to be terrorists and gang members by fiat, to have the power to absurdly decree them members of a hostile nation's invading army, again by fiat, and then to have quasi-unlimited power to remove them unconstrained by any court. The judicial process, Miller says, is for Americans. Immediate deportation is for illegal aliens. That's what he says. He appears to want to dispense with due process for migrants entirely. The Constitution be damned. Drunk with hubris and high on his sad little fascist fantasies, Miller believes he can bury Americans in propaganda about criminal migrants, seducing them into embracing unchecked presidential power as essential to securing public safety. And Trump doesn't care whether you think it's wise or not. In addition, not only that, he's going to use the unchecked power for securing public safety to declare certain movies illegal, apparently. Don't know how he's going to do that one. But Trump's blithe admission that he can follow the law on Abrego Garcia anytime he wants to, and is not doing so because someone somewhere told him he doesn't have to, reveals this as entirely unmoored from anything resembling public order and the rule of law. It's lawless, it's arbitrary, it's dictatorial, and proudly so, in fact. The more transparency we have gained into the rot of corruption and bad faith at the core of this whole saga, the worse it has come to look. Trump himself is exposing it all for what it truly is, the stuff of mad kings. Quite right there, and glad to have gotten that one on the record. One thing that we could have followed up with, and maybe we can follow up with it tomorrow, I don't know, but we certainly don't have time for it today. There was some excellent work published over the weekend by, I think, all in the New York Times, and probably in the Washington Post as well. I don't know. I have to follow up and check it out. But lots of play-by-plays and dissections of the deal, if there even is one, with El Salvador, how it got made, what is and isn't acknowledged to be a part of it, and when. And it's really been remarkable, and I guess is all coming out in the case. And it gets more and more convoluted as the Trump administration lawyers tell more and more ridiculous whoppers just to try to confound the court, where, okay, you've sent him to El Salvador to be held with an agreement with the government there? Yes. Okay, can I see the agreement? No. Well, why not? Well, we didn't write it down. Really? Did you have a verbal agreement? No. So what kind of agreement did you have if it wasn't written or verbal? Are you sure you had an agreement? Because you just told me we had an agreement. Did I say agreement? This can go on for only so long before courts simply say, all right, you're going to have to produce these officials, and if they all sit here and say there's no agreement, wow. Well, then we have a very different kind of a case here, but we still have a case against you. So let's see which one it is. We'll have to read through these developments because, as described by these major papers, at sometime in the near future, because it's really interesting to see what they have for us. We'll just have to try it tomorrow.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, Justice Putnam is up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What's on tap? Well, right at the top there, MAGA Nazi courtier Stephen Miller sued Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts in a bid to control the courts. It's true, and we didn't even get to that. Insane. We have to talk about that. See you tomorrow.